Welcome to this edition of Equinor's Energize Your Day, a series of events Equinor organizes in partnership with Euractiv, and where we wish to discuss trends and issues impacting Europe and the world. This in the spirit of open and constructive dialogue, sharing different perspectives that enhance understanding and promote long-term thinking, leading to collaborative solutions and actions. My name is Olav Omnes-Syversen, and moderator of today's event on how to shape a new EU-Africa partnership. To our panelists and you in the audience, a warm welcome, and thank you for being with us this afternoon. If you wish to engage on social media during this event, please use the hashtag #EADebates. You can ask questions by means of the Ask button in the Q&A section of the Vimeo tool. This debate is recorded and will be available on the Euractiv website. The 2020 Africa Youth Survey found 2/3 of Africa's youth to believe they were living through a transformative African century. And Afro-optimism is seen to rise across the continent. And Europe is taking notice. President von der Leyen's first foreign trip was to meet African Union's counterpart in Ethiopia. In March 2020, the Commission presented its communication towards a comprehensive strategy with Africa. In many ways, this is a continuation of the path set out by the European Commission's first president, also a German, Walter Halterstein, who in 1961 stated that a European policy for Africa is a necessity. Some 40 years later, President Jean-Claude Juncker affirmed that Africa does not need charity, but a true and fair partnership. Since the first EU-Africa summit in 2000, this partnership has acquired a full continental dimension. Today, the twin continents work side by side on some very daunting challenges. Eradicate poverty and improve food security. 36 of the most fragile countries of the world are in Africa. 390 million people, or 1/3 of the continent's population, are living below the poverty line, and 239 million still suffers from undernourishment. Improved access to health services and overcome vaccine inequality. Only 1.4% of the African population has gotten their first COVID-19 jab, and only 0.4% are fully vaccinated. The co-chair of the African Vaccine Delivery Alliance, Ayouade Alekai, says Africa must break free from the shackles of do-gooderism and aid dependency and must move faster towards real self-sufficiency in diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine production. Advancing on the many dimensions of an EU-Africa partnership will be hampered by uneven access to vaccination. Conflicts, poverty, and stalled economic development could result. Job availability. 800 million Africans are expected to enter the workforce within the next 30 years. Africa will need to create jobs equivalent to 12% of the total EU workforce every year over this period. The African Development Bank Group sees at most 3 million jobs a year created, while it would need to be north of 12 million. Failure to do so could mean enhanced migratory pressures and more scenes like the ones we saw in Chuta last week. Access to energy. Today, 600 million in sub-Saharan Africa lack access to electricity. In 2040, the per capita consumption of power in the region is projected to be half that of the EU. In fact, Africa needs to double its energy supply by 2040, a massive challenge. Reignite democracy. The African continent trails at the bottom of the Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index, with deteriorating scores. Yesterday's events in Mali is a strong reminder that democratization processes still can be stopped in their tracks. And then climate change. Africa is an exposure and vulnerability hotspot for climate variability and change impacts according to the World Meteorological Organization's State of Climate report. 81% of the continent's youth reveal climate anxieties according to the 2020 African Youth Survey. Failure to jointly address climate change stands to impact success in all other areas of cooperation. Can a new partnership be instrumental in tackling all these issues? We hope to find out in today's debate, and we are joined by an exceptional panel. We are honored to have with us Ambassador José Fernando Costa Pereira, permanent representative of Portugal to the EU's Political and Security Committee. From the European Commission's Director General for International Partnership, we have Francesca Di Mauro, Deputy Director in the Africa Directorate. The Deputy Head of Mission of the Embassy of Botswana to the European Union, Mrs. Tubatsu Baleseng. Ms. Vanessa Nakate, one of the most influential climate activists in Africa and globally, and one of the UN's Young Leaders for Sustainable Development Goals. And Joseph Travali, Senior Fellow for Digital at the African European Foundation and funder of the think tank All Sides Africa. We look forward to hearing your perspectives on what it will take to make an EU-Africa equal partnership a reality. You will now have all of you some 2 to 4 minutes each to introduce what you see are key features of designing EU-African partnerships fit for the 21st century. Let us start with you, Ambassador Costa Pereira. This is not the first European-African strategy that we cast our eyes on. What do you believe is different this time around?
Thank you, Olaf. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you to Equinor and Euractiv for inviting me to have the opportunity of exchanging ideas with the panel and with the guests. As you said, Olaf, this is not the first strategy. Actually, there was a strategy that had a very specific peculiarity, the fact that it was a joint strategy that was signed back in 2007, written in 2006, and signed in 2007. And it intended to be, as a joint document, a way of balancing the interests of both sides of the two continents, both Africa and Europe. The jury is still out, I would say, about the results that came out of this strategy. And I believe this was the reason why, when this new commission came into Brussels, that it decided that there was need to look at the relationship with Africa from a different perspective. I suppose Francesca will tell us a little bit more about it. But in our view, although there is nothing wrong, and I would like to pinpoint this from the beginning, that Europe shall defend its interests vis-à-vis the relationship with Africa. At the same time, it makes no sense to establish a strategy for Africa. That's why the name changed for a strategy with Africa, in order to allow for also our African partners to be able to define themselves what they want from Europe, which is something that sometimes is difficult to pinpoint. In this sense, as you said in your introduction, a partnership of equals is the ultimate target. But it's difficult to establish a partnership of equals when one of the continents depends in a large scale from the assistance policy of the other continent. Until we are able to solve this, until we are able to establish a different kind of approach in our relationships, I'm afraid that this partnership of equals will not be absolutely possible. What to do then, as you asked, to change the situation? I would say it's imperative that the relationship is establishing a different pattern than just either our policy of providing grants or the Chinese policy of providing loans. Indeed, for Africa to come out of its current stage, where the difficulties, the challenges that you pointed out, from poverty to democracy in jeopardy, can be solved. Indeed, as you said, Africa has a demographic challenge, in the sense that a lot of young people are coming into the job market every year, and there is not a number of sufficient jobs. How to do it? Well, you need a lot of investment. But for this investment to become a reality, especially the type of investment that creates jobs, the one that is done through small and medium-sized companies, you need also to have an environment that is conducive to that investment. And that's where the issue of governance comes in. And that, for me, this is the central issue in Africa, the problem of governance. For people to invest in it, to have certainty, they need to be sure that their investment will pay dividends. And only after this problem of governance, that implies a lot of things from stability to an impartial justice, until this problem is solved, it will be very difficult to capture the kind of investment that Africa needs. So that's where we have work to do. And the kind of investment that will be sustainable. By that, I'm saying that the jobs will be sustainable and will be something that will be in transition to a green economy, because this is another of the problems in Africa, even for those countries that are richer than the others because they depend on their ability to export raw materials. Some of them are too dependent on the fuel economy. And if they don't start to have the transition into a different path, it will be very difficult for their economies to provide the kinds of jobs that are needed. So there is a monumental challenge in front of us, for the Africans in first place, because it's their continent, but also for us Europeans, because we are their neighbors. And therefore, it is a common interest that we can solve the situation. But again, I'm challenging the traditional idea that is through assistance policies that we are able to do so. Of course, in the past, there were several different attempts to start changing this reality. A lot of different methodologies was attempted, say, like the blending, for instance, the partnerships between private and the public sector. Did they produce results? In some cases, yes. And that's another point, perhaps, that we should start looking at, which is that we consider Africa as a whole, when there are right now quite a number of differences between several different countries in Africa. And we should take into consideration that reality. But nevertheless, the challenges are there. I think we need to psychologically be able to go beyond what is the traditional modus operandi of the relationship between the two countries. This will take necessarily time, because people need to change their approach. But it is an effort that will be worthwhile to take and to tackle, in order that the alleviation of poverty and a stronger democracy can take hold of in the African continent. And I suppose I was told that I should not speak for too long, so I would just stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, José. And I've jotted down that we need to review dependencies, or the way we look at dependencies, and also that we have to move beyond traditional approaches. We will revert to some of those elements later. But Deputy Director Di Mauro, since early 2000, we've seen a communication by the Commission on Africa almost every single, or at most every second year. Are we getting it right this time around with this new strategy with Africa, or an approach towards a new strategy with Africa?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olaf, and also thank you for inviting me to this very distinguished panel and debate. So as you said, it will not be too long, because it's good, I think, to have an interaction. So I indeed want to point out to another, let's say, specificity of the title of the strategy, which is actually called Towards a Comprehensive Strategy with Africa. And it goes very much in the same direction as what the ambassador was saying, in the sense of, this is a little bit, our take or our, offer on the table, but we would like very much to discuss with the Africans to see, how they see things, what are their views. So you may say that there have been already other African strategies, and at the last summit, the one on Abidjan, there was, this roadmap, that was also put on the table. You could also wonder what has happened there. I mean, I think we have to, be differentiated, as it was already mentioned. It's not that Africa is a block. There are a lot of things that are happening in Africa that really go precisely in that direction of modernization of the economies, of digitalization of the economies, of really wanting to push reforms that are also going to attract private sector. So I think we shouldn't, just see Africa as one. The difference, I think, one of the main differences now is that maybe before the topic of Africa was very much relegated, let's say, to the external action people. So, us in DGX development or the External Action Service, when it was created, we were the one dealing with Africa. But if you now actually look at our engagement, you already mentioned yourself. I mean, President von der Leyen's first trip outside of the EU was to Addis, which is, of course, is also the seat of the African Union. It was really this kind of acknowledgement that, Africa is our neighbor. There is a lot of untapped potential that we want to exploit in that relationship with Africa. And it is also a whole of Commission and a whole of EU approach to Africa. So we see a lot now when we have internal discussion with all many other Director General within the Commission, that there is a huge interest in precisely tapping that potential. So the question of Africa is not just relegated to some of us, but it is really seen as a geopolitical geopolitical interest and a geopolitical dimension, which is the whole, the whole new approach of this new Commission to look at things in a much more geopolitical way, which also means that whatever we want to do for the Green Deal for Europe, may have an impact for Africa. So what does it take to us to precisely prepare our African partners and work with our African partners to prepare for whatever we want to have as rules, but also because we believe that the fight against climate, the climate action, digitalization are key issues that need to be addressed, as well as the jobs and growth for their own benefits. So there's the whole issue of is it interest? Is it values? I mean, we don't really see that these are in contradiction. We can have a mutual interest in promoting, mutual, businesses between Africa and Europe, while at the same time also promoting a number of values: the value of inclusivity, the value of women empowerment, gender and women empowerment, the value of avoiding exclusion, but also the values of respecting social standards, environmental standards, which again maybe puts us a little bit different from other actors. And the idea, of course, is to raise the standard rather than to have this race to the bottom, where we would have the many actors that are present in Africa, and there are many, and we are totally aware that there are competing interests in Africa, but we also want to we have this really, I would say, ambition and vision that it is only by attacking and addressing all the aspects in a sustainable manner: social sustainability, economic sustainability, financial sustainability. And here, go back to the issue of loans versus grants and so on. And loans are not bad per se, but loans are supposed to be there also for effective projects, effective investment, and not the end stadium or bridge to nowhere. So this is a little bit our seal of sustainability that we are bringing to Africa. And I also can tell you, with all the various discussions we already have with some countries, very clear, Ghana has a strategy of going beyond aid. So they are clearly already thinking that, of course, aid is not going to be enough, because the needs, as we said, are huge in Africa. So what to do to go beyond is indeed to attract private investors, to be able to borrow, but for the right causes. And to attract private investment, it also means reforms. So I join here again what the ambassador was saying on governance, which is, in my view, in our view, a critical aspects of whatever has to be done to be able to attract investors. I had, of course, a whole spin about the COVID and all of that. We can maybe come back to it, but for me, the COVID was a little bit the test of the strategy, of the comprehensive strategy with Africa, precisely because it really shows that whatever we have put there, I haven't mentioned, but we have these 5 key areas, the 5 key partnerships on Green Deal, on digitalization, on jobs and growth, on peace and governance, and on migration. All of these are all the more relevant in a post-COVID world, because it's been very clear that inclusion and inequalities, COVID has amplified all of these inequalities and exclusion factors. And thanks to digitalization, we can overcome them. And thanks to creating proper and sustainable jobs, we can overcome the huge socioeconomic impact that COVID had on Africa, which is maybe less on the health side, but more on the socioeconomic side. So the strategy, I would just like to conclude by saying it is still very relevant. And of course, we have engaged with our African partners throughout as we could. But of course, the ultimate engagement is with the summit. And this is, of course, something that the African Union EU summit, which has not yet taken place, which we hope will take place perhaps early next year. But we can come back on it. But this is a little bit the thrust of how we can introduce the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca, and also thank you for stressing the value-based approach to the strategy. I think if you base yourself on values, getting things right is actually a lot easier. Deputy Chief of Mission Baleseng, seen with the lens of your home country, Botswana, which is a success by many measures when it comes to the role of democracy and also the role of business and investments. If you look towards Europe, what kind of partnership and efforts would you be looking for in this new strategy?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me at the outset state that I'm excited to participate in this panel. And we are convinced that this time around there's commitment on both sides to a renewed relationship between Africa and Europe. The undertaking in the proposed strategy that has been referred to, that is undergoing intensive interrogation in Africa, it represents a significant example of the commitment to revitalize and reset this long-standing relationship that we have with Europe. Africa needs Europe, and Europe needs Africa. Therefore, a strong resilience based on an equal and dynamic partnership, that has been said before, respect for one another's point of view, and commitment to honor obligations will ensure that the citizens of our two continents continue to reap the benefits of this relationship. This partnership to us is more critical today as we continue to deal with the debilitating effects of the COVID pandemic, where livelihoods have been severely impacted, with multitude of people losing jobs every day, businesses being devastated, increasing poverty and the looming risk of food insecurity and famine. Firstly, we believe that we have to work together to ensure that we save lives. We have the golden opportunity to support value chains in the health sector, build productive capacities in Africa, and implement life-saving programs that include successful and timely vaccinations of all people in Africa. We also have to redouble efforts to ensure that the recovery of Africa is fast, meaningful, sustained, and inclusive. Concerted efforts should be made to assist upper middle-income countries suffering from COVID-related economic disruption and ensure that they are equally facilitated to access vaccines available in the market. They must be allowed the space to ensure that immediate manufacturing and supply capacity is not only increased but diversified. We are happy that all the 5 priorities of the draft strategy align with the strategies of the African Union and the African governments especially towards post-economic recovery. In the case of Botswana, we have an economic recovery and transformation plan that has prioritized the creation of jobs and sustainable economic development through digital transformation, renewable energy and green transformation, transport and connectivity, and the development of agricultural value chains and sustainable food systems. The successful implementation of this plan requires cooperation with Europe and the international community as a whole. In this instance, we firmly believe that it will be beneficial if all EU member states come on board. One of the difficulties we experience is that when we approach some EU member states for strategic partnership, they are quick to inform us that Botswana is not among their priority countries. The enthusiasm displayed by the EU institutions and Brussels must trickle to all stakeholders, including individual European governments, the private sector, and civil society. We believe that upper middle income countries ought to be facilitated for technology transfer, capacity building to enable them to continue to consolidate economic recovery and build resilience. We've been hearing that the biggest problem with Africa right now is the issue of governance. And we all know that Botswana is the longest multi-party democracy in Africa. And we are a country that is based on the rule of law. There are legal frameworks to protect investment, but we are not getting as much investment as we are hoping to get, or as the credentials would be allowing us to receive. So we are asking ourselves, sometimes when we talk, it does not translate into what is happening, what we see happening on the ground. So investing in digital transformation and green transformation, as well as transport and infrastructure, is instrumental to supporting poverty eradication, creating employment, and unlocking trade and high productivity in Africa. Lastly, I just wanted to say that the success of this renewed partnership needs to be inclusive by involving all stakeholders in both continents, including the private sector, civil society, and especially young people. Youth must be provided with tools to succeed politically, economically, and socially. In most countries, about half of the population is younger than 30 years old. This important cohort must be visible at all levels. They must be allowed to thrive as entrepreneurs. Otherwise, all this will remain but a rhetoric. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debatso, and thanks for recollecting that. We live in a pandemic, and there is an importance, one imperative, and that is to save lives. I also jotted down that we need to revert in our discussion to the issue of infrastructure and sustainable investments, and we will get back to that. You also mentioned the youth. And Ms. Nakate, you belong to the young generation that wishes to tackle the challenges of your continent and the world heads on. Are you confident that Africa and the EU can become strategic partners in the fight against global climate change?
Thank you so much. Happy to be speaking with all of you today. When I think about these discussions, it really reminds me of all the summits and conferences, and how there is always, so much discussion and a lot of things suggested. But then the following year, we come back to the same thing. The following year, we come back to the same thing. And my question is always that, when shall we stop discussing, and when shall we actually implement the things that we are talking about? To me, the beginning of all these challenges is the climate crisis. When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, you realize that we won't be able to eradicate poverty with climate change existing. We won't be able to achieve zero hunger if climate change is leaving millions of people and communities with no access to food, with no access to water. We won't be able to achieve gender equality if women and girls are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. We won't be able to see peace in our communities. We won't have access to affordable, clean energy. We won't have access to clean air, clean water, sanitation, if the climate crisis exists. To me, this is the beginning of all these problems. And if we are to solve them, we have to solve the climate crisis. We have to tackle the climate crisis. So greetings to you all. My name is Vanessa Nakate, and I am a climate activist from Uganda. In the first week of January 2019, I held my first climate strike after seeing and researching about how climate change affected the people in my country. And I also went ahead to understand how it specifically affects the people in the African continent. This is when I realized that we are facing the greatest threat right now. And why is that? The climate crisis is already destroying vast parts of the African continent. This is tragic and ironic when you think about how Africa is one of the least emitters of CO2 emissions, and yet it is among the most affected by climate change right now. Historically, the entire continent of Africa is responsible for 3% of global emissions, and yet Africans are already suffering some of the most brutal impacts fueled by the climate crisis, from the floods to the hurricanes to the droughts to the heat waves to the landslides, etc. We are on the front lines of the climate crisis. This is why I want people to understand that this is more than weather, this is more than statistics. This is about the people who are being impacted right now. Many people have lost their lives, while countless more have lost their farms, have lost their businesses, have lost their homes. This is when I remind you about climate change being the cause of all these challenges. Without homes, people are being left homeless. Without farms, people are being left hungry. Without businesses, people are being kept in extreme poverty. Cyclone Idai was one of the worst cyclones to affect the African continent, ripping apart and flooding large parts of Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. The heavy rainfall and strong winds left more than 1,300 people dead and many more recorded as missing, and it also left an economic crisis. And last year, the water levels of Lake Victoria rose as a result of heavy rainfall in East Africa, and homes were flooded, farms were destroyed again, people were displaced, and toilets were submerged, leaving a water crisis. Southern parts of Africa have experienced terrible droughts that are leading to food scarcity and water scarcity. The water levels of Zambezi River, Lake Chad, and Victoria Falls are lower than they have been for decades. To be specific, Lake Chad has shrunk to a tenth of its original size in just 50 years, and half of Nigeria has no access to water. So for every 1% increase in drought in our communities, there is a 2.4% decrease in agricultural output. That means to us, less rains means hunger, starvation, and death for many people, as well as too much rain means hunger, starvation, and death for many people. We may be facing the same storm of the climate crisis, but we are definitely in different boats. But what is the main response from developed countries for the social and economic crisis that we are seeing in Africa? Continued investment in the fossil fuels, continued burning of fossil fuels. But I have one thing to say to countries and banks that are continuously funding the digging up of fossil fuels in African countries. We cannot eat coal and we cannot drink oil. This should be the beginning of our discussion for Europe to address the climate crisis, and not just to give targets, but to give realistic activities or realistic strategies that are going to be put in place to stop the climate crisis. Like I said, if the climate crisis is there, many people are going to continue living in poverty. We won't be able to achieve gender equality. Many children will continue to sleep hungry. Many more will continue to drop out of school. Conflicts will continue in our communities as people struggle for the limited resources. This is what needs to be done. We want climate justice. We want climate action. And this starts from stopping investments in fossil fuels and starting investments in renewable energy, and also solutions that we know can work right now. I know that we must find new solutions to tackle the climate crisis, and I know that we need clean energy technologies that need investment, research, and development. But we also need to massively increase support for the things that we know will work right now and will help right now. That's why I love to talk about Project Drawdown, which is a well-respected ranking of solutions to tackle climate change, and it lists the top 100 solutions, things that we can do to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And ranked number 5 is educating girls and family planning. But how many girls are receiving education right now? This is something that also needs to be looked into. Many girls in Africa are not receiving education. And yet this is one of the tools that we have to address the climate crisis, because it's going to help us build resilience in communities. It's going to help us reduce inequalities in communities. And it's also going to reduce emissions all at the same time. So it's also time to look at the solutions that can work right now, not solutions that we think will work, but are not yet existing. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. To me, a real tour de force of the problems of the African continent, and thank you for underlining the importance of dealing with the water crisis, the importance of securing investments into a clean energy system for Africa, and also to stress the important role of education, not only for girls, but for the young generation in Africa. You also mentioned, Vanessa, innovation. And Mr. Travagli, you have worked on innovation, on digitalization for a number of years. What do you see in the strategy that can help the Africans transition to an inclusive, innovative economy? If you can elaborate on that.
Yes, thank you, Olaf. Very happy to be the last to speak. It's very interesting to hear the order before. First of all, I really like the title of the panel, and I would like to build around that. The first question, indeed, for me is what is the strategic move that Europe needs to make? And I think probably the first one, I don't know if it's a strategic move and it's linked to innovation, it's really a shift in mindset. From what I've heard today, I think as long as the starting point of the discussion between Europe and Africa will be that Africa is a continent that really needs assistance from Europe, I think we won't move anywhere with this starting point. So the first thing is to change this mindset, because this is very important, because it's only when you will do this shift in mindset that you will start seeing the opportunity in an equal partnership between Europe and Africa. And building on what just Vanessa said, for instance, she mentioned innovative solutions. For the last, I think, 10 years, Europe has been working in a number of solutions. For instance, Germany has been leading in e-fuel development with Audi, with Ford, with Volvo. They have been developing quite some solutions, and they are planning the transition to step away from fossil fuel by 2030 and beyond. And what does this mean for Africa? The second example is, for instance, Iceland. Iceland is today leading in green methanol. And even beyond that, in Belgium, you will see a number of cases where they are developing carbon negative material for constructions. So all those innovative SMEs, it's known that they have some difficulty to scale up in Europe. So it's an opportunity for them when we build this partnership with Africa, so they can actually find new markets where they can deploy their technology, where they can scale their technology even much more than in Europe itself. So those are very concrete examples where innovation can help build a more, let's say, equal partnership and win-win partnership between Europe and Africa. The second interesting point is that is embedded in the title is the EU serious about engaging with Africa? I think what I would say is EU can be more serious about engaging with Africa. It's really moving from goodwill to action. I think as long as the discussion between Europe and Africa, between Europe, the EU and Africa will remain at the very high institutional level, we will have an issue to see the benefit of an equal partnership. And again, that's where innovation in the way we partner will be very interesting. For instance, the Africa-Europe Foundation, for which where I am a fellow, we are really thinking about triangular partnership, where there is a third component coming into the picture between Europe and Africa to really serve as a facilitator in building this relationship, and to make sure that we really move from goodwill to action, that we come with implementable projects. This is what is missing in this partnership. We know that Africa today has the most extensive network of partnership, but this partnership is not, this network of partnership is not actually coordinated, orchestrated for higher impact. So having this third, let's say, organization or group of organizations to facilitate the dialogue between EU and Africa is something that I believe is extremely important. So in short, we really need to move from goodwill to action, and that's, for me, that's key. And we need to really shift our mindset to be able to identify the many innovative opportunities that are there to build, let's say, what I would call a more circular innovation model between the two continents.
Thanks a lot, Joseph, and thanks to you all for sharing your initial thoughts on the topic. We'll turn to some questions, and I want to address a first question to you, Jose. The pandemic has in some way made it more difficult to advance the strategy and the discussions. But have you already had sort of bilateral feedback either from member states or from African countries on the strategy that helps you to design the process for going forward with the strategy and how to make sure that we get a valid discussion among the AU and the EU on this once the summit is being organized early next year?
Well, as you said, indeed, COVID had an impact in the sense that these kind of big jamboree meetings, either ministerials or summits, are not the same thing if they are done digitally. And there were several attempts done by the people in charge, basically the President of the European Council, who has the initiative to define the calendar of the summits, as well as the High Representative, Vice President of the Commission, who's in charge of the ministerials. And the several attempts did not produce results. I mean, the meetings did not take place, although some had been staged in different format from the usual one. But the African side insisted very much that it should be done physically. And so there was the need for a constant report or a constant postponement, rather, of the meetings. That does not mean that we are not discussing Africa. We discuss Africa quite often in the European fora, in the sense that we understand the importance that all Africa has for us, not only the countries of the southern neighborhoods, so Northern Africa, but also Sub-Saharan Africa. Because the crises are there, the COVID in first place, of course, but also the ones that Vanessa mentioned in terms of climate change, and of course the more structural ones of poverty and peace and security that unfortunately are still a reality over there. What we do is that let's not think that we only do things with Africa during the summits or the ministerials. Nothing of the kind. There is a work that is done on a daily basis through the delegations and embassies and several different projects and the missions that we have in several different places. So there's a lot of investment, and when I say investment, I'm not only talking about financial investment, but personal investment, ideas investment, innovation investment, business fora that are taking place. There was a business forum, for instance, in Lisbon in April, bringing companies from both sides, precisely with the idea how can we improve the relationship in several different fields. So this work has been done. Now, Youssef, I think, was mentioning the need to go from ideas to actions, and this has been attempted in the past to coordinate better what we do. The joint strategy that I spoke about, the one from 2007, had established a number of partnerships, thematic partnerships, from peace and security to energy, so on and so forth. It didn't work that well. That we have to be honest about it. There was at a certain stage a lack of investment by the two sides in making things work. It's always quite difficult because while we have a well-organized, systematic way of coordination amongst ourselves on the European side, this coordination is a little bit more fragile on the African side. Although we would like to consider that the African Union is the mirror image of the European Union, the reality is that it is not. And therefore, there is still a process of building up resilience and strength within the African Union that has not yet been able to reach its zenith. And this creates another layer of difficulty, which is sometimes to understand exactly whom should be our interlocutors according to the different issues. But I like also to point out that there is an important bridge between Africa and Europe that we don't speak so often, but it's also very important, which is the diaspora. The African diaspora in Europe, and to a certain extent, European diaspora in Africa, and the kind of contacts people to people. Those are very important. And sometimes they are more important, I would say, than the official channels, in the sense that people can exchange opinions, can exchange ideas, can exchange plans. And if we really want to empower civil society, you also have to take into consideration the diaspora organizations, because they have the clout to be able to start changing things. I'm very favorable to bottom-up type of approaches and not top-down kind of approaches. Perhaps both are needed in a sense that we need to establish a balance between the two. But in reality, it's fundamental that people at all levels feel that they have something to gain with a better coordinating effort between the two continents. It's in everybody's interest, and sometimes we have been failing in terms of public communication to make this clear to everyone. We are facing global challenges, and those global challenges can only be done through cooperation between all the interest stakeholders. It's not just Africa that is suffering the ravages of climate change. Of course, they increased the issue because it came from a level of poverty that is, of course, increased by the results of this climate change. But the effort has to be global. If we are not able to do it globally, there's always, if someone is out of the picture, then the reality is that it's going to have an impact on everybody else. So this, in some case, I understand sometimes the frustration of the activists because they wanted for things to go faster. But those are transitions that are difficult to manage because they touch on many people's lives. And you don't convince people from one day to the other by imposing anything. You have to make them understand the advantages of going from one situation to the other. This takes time. I understand when I was Vanessa's age, I also like to go faster. At my age, things are definitely slower because we have to take into consideration several different interests that are also legitimate and have to be taken care. But the path, I would say, is established. We all know what our planet will be if we don't take action. But we need to convince those that are the laggards in order that we can produce the results. And I'm not sure I answered your question, Ola, but I hope so.
You did, and you raised the interesting question, the Kissinger question, who to call in Africa, which has normally been addressed to the European Union. And indeed, it is important to have the right interlocutor. And I think Debatso raised the issue of being heard bilaterally, bilateral versus AU to EU relations. So Francesca, is there in the strategy barriers to member states and bilateral relations to specific African countries, or is this sort of building nicely upon each other?
Sorry, not sure I got your question. What kind of barriers?
Barriers to bilateral relationship between EU members and African Union members, so nation-to-nation type of relationship, because Debatso alluded to the fact that Botswana, for example, is not getting the right attention from a number of European members or the European Union as such. So whether or not member states and the Union can act more effectively together is the question.
Yes. No, thank you. I absolutely heard what Madame Badesang was saying. Perhaps in terms of, if we look at, let's say, bilateral presence in terms of, again, development cooperation, it is clear that the member states have to be selective in the sense that you will see almost every member state has a strategy for Africa, and there they actually define a list of priority countries, be they defined either in terms of high needs, countries that are a bit more at the bottom of the Human Development Index, or countries in conflict, or geostrategic areas. So each member state will have a little bit, is area of predilection, if we can call it like that. The difference with us is that the European Union is present everywhere. I mean, we do have a EU delegation, as we call them, in every country. And let's say the beauty of Lisbon, of the new Treaty of Lisbon, and the role of the HRVP, the High Representative Vice President, is precisely that even though the member states may not all be present in a certain country, we have those discussions with all the member states when we have to define a policy vis-à-vis a country. So this, let's say, unitedness around strategies vis-à-vis countries is there. The possibility is there, and we have actually seen a lot with the Team Europe approach that was born out of the COVID response. So last year, after the COVID, we really put together a huge package, which was 8 billion actually for responding to the COVID as Team Europe. This Team Europe approach, I would say, that was born out of a crisis, we can say that it is really there to stay. So it is now rolled over into the programming exercise that we are doing. And the programming, of course, is about the NDICI funds, meaning the funds, that are replacing now the European Development Fund, so the Global Europe, as we call it, nicer than NDICI. But that programming is done with the member states, and we are actually looking much more for synergies and for ways to bring in even the smaller member states that perhaps maybe may not have a strong presence, for example, in this case in Botswana, but I can still, through our Team Europe initiative, as we call them, maybe, still be active, still provide some technical assistance and so on. But it is clear that, we cannot change completely, let's say, the list of priority countries. I think you should take it, Mrs. Badesang, you should take it a bit as a compliment, because, of course, Botswana, as you rightly pointed out, is really a bit of a model of, strong democracy, a very stable country that actually has managed to manage precisely its natural resources, in this case, diamonds, extremely well. So, you have actually able to provide, social protection and basic services to your population. So if you look in terms of needs, of course, it is not as high, as other countries who are, as I said, much more to the bottom of the human development. So you should take it a bit as a compliment. Now, for diversification of the economy, that is where I think indeed it would be interesting to see how much Botswana will be able to reap the benefit of these new instruments that we are we're putting on the table, which are linked to what we call the European Sustainable Development Finance. External investment plan, as it was called before, which really tried to combine the risking instrument, meaning bringing guarantees to the private sector, precisely to reduce the risk and to invest in African countries, perhaps because there is this little bit of reticence at the beginning, but we are providing guarantees that are trying to go over that reticence and go into countries that are very stable with, political stability, with good, enabling environment for investment, that should be able to attract. You have a fantastic beef livestock sector where maybe there's already some European investors, but there could be more, and not just European investors. I'm also talking about Botswanan investors. So clearly, situations are very different country by country, but the idea of acting together in a much more joint approach under the Team Europe, I think, is really a new way of doing things that is here to stay. As I was said, it was born at the COVID, but now it is going to be there to stay.
Thanks, Francesca. I would like to go back to one of the points that Vanessa raised about education, and a statistic that I read, that 70,000 Africans leave the continent to pursue opportunities elsewhere in the world, so the so-called brain drain. Now, one thing is to help, and for the European Union to help progress in the educational system, but the other one is, of course, to help to create the framework, economic framework for retaining talents in Africa. And I was wondering, Tibatso, whether, or Joseph, whether you in your respective countries, Botswana and Rwanda, where you have national policies in place, or you would need more support in order to avoid brain drain going forward. Shall we start with Tibatso?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much. May I just, maybe before I answer that question, just say that we are aware of the Team Europe initiatives that are going in Botswana to mobilize programs for the multi-funding framework. And we are very actively participating. The stakeholders in Botswana are very actively participating in that. But what I was talking about mostly is in the areas of investment. That you'll find that, for example, Botswana has what you call Smart Botswana, which is a very big digitalization strategy. That was even incepted prior to the promulgation of the proposed Africa-EU strategy. This is already under the leadership of the president. It is aimed at availing internet connectivity countrywide and doing that with the private sector and leaving no one behind, availing high-quality service delivery through the internet, upgrading the education system to make it internationally competitive, and that all graduates at all levels are updated to the needs of the current and evolving market, and that cutting-edge e-services are available to all citizens. And in this, we need innovation, we need research, we need investment, and we need partnerships in order to ensure that the citizens and investors are able to co-create the e-government platforms. So in this way, yes, we are aware, we may be flattered that Botswana is doing well, but we need for the Botswana doing well to be sustained by getting FDI in order to ensure that it continues to do well and it continues to be a model for success and a model for success for the rest of Africa. And in this regard, as a country, as Botswana, we have created what is called a South-South and Triangular Cooperation Strategy. I heard Yusuf talk about triangular cooperation, where we are saying that we have gained comparative advantage in a lot of areas like good governance, like prudent management of financial resources. And there are opportunities for us cooperating with other partners, including the Europe, in order to ensure that we share experiences of what we have learned over the years with other countries within the African Union. That is our way of ensuring that we are not only just getting, but we are also using the knowledge that we have gained in order to retain, in order to share it with other African countries and ensure that everybody, it's a win-win situation and everybody becomes a success after. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Joseph, on the brain drain, how can we avoid that?
Well, I think the brain drain, I think it's about really managing demographics. That's an important point moving forward, moving from here. And what would be important, I think, is that we take strategies that will enable us to really decouple population growth from investment that are required in infrastructure. For instance, in the area of education, I think we can really leverage from digital solution to build decentralized universities across countries, which mean across region and then across the continent. This will be already a major factor if we can deploy this type of virtual university, high quality standard, which will enable African students to really study from where they are at lower cost. That's number one. The second area where we can, I think, improve, it's also in the area of healthcare. We can leverage from digital solution to build on the decentralized healthcare infrastructure that we already have in African countries, to make them much more robust, so that people can really build on let's say, telemedicine, diagnostic based on emerging technologies and so on, without having to go to Europe. Because the reason why you go to Europe is two things. One is education and the other one is healthcare. So that's the number one thing. It's how you deal with the management demographics. The second thing, which I think is important if you want to avoid, I'm talking about the long-term solution. If you want to avoid the brain drain, it's really to build, to decouple economic growth from resource consumption. So to have a kind of a very sustainable economies where you develop robust economies across the continent built on, let's say, the bioeconomy, the carbon economy, and so on, which are clear opportunity for Africa. And I think, in any case, the way I see the brain drain, for me, I always talk about brain circulation. The reason why I talk about brain circulation is that myself, I grew up in Senegal, then I moved to Belgium, US, where I spent 25 years, and then I moved back to Africa. So it's really about brain circulation and not necessarily about brain drain.
Thanks a lot, Joseph. I like the brain circulation concept. I was just sort of, the reflection is that you get back to it's the economy stupid type of Bill Clinton. And if we do not fix the economy of Africa, a lot of these other issues that we need to fix won't be fixed either. But we have little time left, and I would really like to return to what Vanessa said about climate change and having to invest in a sustainable energy system for Africa. And to you, José, Francesco, Vanessa, on what can the Green Deal of Europe be a model for Africa, or do we need to think a totally different model when it comes to the energy system for Africa altogether? Shall we start with you, Francesca?
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, I really wanted to react a lot to what Vanessa said. So thanks a lot, and thank you, Vanessa, for reminding us. I mean, maybe I was not totally clear in the presentation of the strategy. The Green Deal is really a big part of it. As you may know, I mean, as the new Commission arrived in end of 2019, really Green Deal is come up not really so much as one priority, but really as the priority of this Commission, because of the impact this has on so many aspects of life, as you rightly pointed out, security, really protection of people, and the impact that we are now, in the middle of the COVID. This is also due to, loss of biodiversity and the zoonotic, traveling from the forest into the markets and into the cities and into us. So it is it really, came up into our face as a big impact of climate change. So to really make very clear that the strategy is really brought a lot by that. And in whatever we propose, we have, of course, on the renewable energy, we do propose actually an initiative on renewable energy initiative for Africa, which will really try to transform any new production capacity that has to be green. And I can already reassure you that our bank, the European Investment Bank, has already declared that they don't fund fossil fuels. So we do not fund fossil fuels anymore already for several years, and even on gas, there's a lot of debate. So be reassured that whatever we will fund is going to be only renewable energy. But not only, I think we are looking at the whole spectrum. So we're looking at cooking, and clean cooking it's a big chunk also of what is produced in or what has an impact also also on deforestation in Africa. But it's also the way we do infrastructure. Infrastructure has to be climate resilient. You mentioned rightly the Idai cyclone. I actually went to Mozambique precisely to inaugurate a road that we've been building up there some time ago, and clearly the roads now these days, they have to be built, but bearing in mind the impact that climate can have. So a very thin road with a very bad drainage system, I can tell you, will not resist the cyclone and so on. So everything we do, we have to take that in mind. Agriculture. Now in agriculture, this is a big also component of what we want to promote, and it is agroecology. It is having an agriculture that is sustainable, that can combine, forest, so agroecology combining the forest and the agriculture precisely to avoid the loss of biodiversity with the huge impact, negative impact it has. We have, you may have heard about the Green Wall, which is this big initiative along the whole Sahel that our president has already committed that we're going to fund this great Green Wall, via a number of initiatives. Conservation per se, we really, it's one of the things that we're going to do. So clearly, and rightly, you say that it is not a matter of imposing targets onto Africa, but it is really trying to leapfrog and to avoid that the consumption and production pattern in Africa are gonna follow the bad examples that maybe we did many years ago, and also because the impact of climate change is huge on Africa. So there, I really wanted to reassure you. Also wanted to reassure two other things very quickly. One is on education. As you may have seen also under the new programming for Africa, and in general under the Global Europe, we have a 20% target for human development. But within that target, our commissioner has very clearly stated that education, she has decided on another sub-target of 10% to be spent on education. And I totally agree with you that education of women is critical. It's critical to keep women longer in school so that they don't get married early and don't start having children early. So the longer you keep girls in school, the less children they will have. The more they're educated, also the better it's going to be for the nutrition of these children, because they know about what is a sustainable nutrition. And in general, on climate change, we also want to try and promote an education system that already raises awareness about that. So totally agree on education. And of course, youth, it is critical. It is also a very dear theme for our commissioner. We really want to engage very strongly with the youth. You may have heard that she has announced she will be having a sounding board, our commissioner, and there was, I think, a whole application for young people to be part of the sounding board. She really wants to engage, but not just at her level. She also wants each of our delegation to really continue and enhance what we're already doing, which is to talk to civil society in general and to young people in particular, because this is where also we want to have a whole of society approach and talk not just to government and, let's say, the elites in place, but also to the young people, because they are the future generation and they're the one who are going to be taking the toll of all policies that are not in line with the big global challenges that we are facing. Thank you,
Francesca. Rapidly, José, is the European Green Deal a model for Africa?
I think, in my view, things should be tailor-made. Africa has different perspectives, in the sense that you cannot process the transition as easily in a country, for instance, that is highly dependable on oil, and there's a complete infrastructure built upon this specific industry, and a country that is not. So I would say that I'm not sure exporting models is the best way to produce results. Models should be adapted to realities. And we also have a reality, for instance, that in some African countries there is a clear transfer of people from rural areas to cities, and this also have, of course, an impact in a way that people do their lives, and the impact that on climate change. So I think we should be flexible. I think we should take one country, each country by itself, and check what would be the best way possible to produce results, taking into consideration what is the reality of this country. This does not prevent to have a general strategy about, for instance, changing the sources of energy. For sure, this can be applied everywhere, but the way you apply it is where you have to be more careful, in the sense that you have to take into consideration the local perspectives, the local circumstances. The same goes, of course, also respective to education and girls' education. We know that in some African countries this is easier than in others because of cultural impact or religious impact in the way people think about those issues. So there is, again, a work of trying to convince people that those ultimate goals are the ones that are fundamental for them, and that's where we have to focus our attention, in order that, as I said before, we don't need to impose things. We need to convince people that it's the right way to go, in order that we can really reduce the sometimes a significant resistance to something that would produce very dire results if not tackled right now.
Thank you, José. And Vanessa, when you look to Europe in terms of climate change or in terms of energy policy, what kind of inspirations do you take back to your own continent and to your own generation?
Well, thank you very much. I think I really take inspirations from the activists that continue to pressure and demand for climate justice from the leaders. And when it comes to green solutions, I take inspiration from what I already see is happening, not what I see being discussed or what I see being proposed, but then we don't really see put in action. I can give an example. In 2019, I started a project, and this project involves the installation of solar panels and clean cooking stoves in schools in Uganda. And so far I can say I have carried out installations in 11 schools. Of course, this is not something that someone will talk about as, a part of a green economy, because it may seem small, it may seem grassroots, but what I can say is every action is important, and I think it's time to look at what is already on ground, to look at what people and communities are already doing on ground, to make this world a better place, instead of, thinking about what needs to be done. We have to first look at what people are doing and what is already working. I know that a green economy is possible, not just in Uganda, but also in Africa at large. And I can say that for a green economy to work, it has to really put into consideration the realities of the people in these countries. It also has to put into consideration the wisdom of the people in these countries, especially the wisdom of indigenous communities. I can say that indigenous communities have been able to preserve our ecosystems for many years, and they are usually left out of these conversations. So we need this wisdom for our green economies. I can give an example. In my culture, names are given according to plants or to trees or according to animals, and we have like different clans, and every clan has like a totem. It can be an animal, it can be a plant, or anything that is about the natural world. And if someone has maybe a totem of a cow or an elephant or any bird, any animal you can think of, they are not allowed to hurt that animal. They are not allowed to kill that animal. They are not allowed to eat that animal or even that tree. So through this naming of people, animals have been preserved for a long period of time. Trees have been preserved for many years. And this kind of wisdom is needed for our green economies. We cannot wipe it out. So it's important to put into consideration indigenous wisdom of preservation of our ecosystems of our natural world, and also to look at things that are already happening in communities, like the school project that I've talked about, that is lighting up and transitioning schools to renewable energy, as well as providing these clean cooking technologies in these schools that not only are stopping or reducing the indoor pollution, but also protecting the environment in the long run.
Thank you, Vanessa, and I can't think of a better way to conclude a debate on a young voice from a great continent. And thank you for underlining the fact that both wisdom and value are important parts of a partnership that we hope will grow strong over the years to come, and that helps both the EU and Africa to deal with some of the daunting challenges that we have discussed during this panel debate. I thank all of our listeners, and I thank all of you panelists for having taken part, and good day to all of us for the rest of the day. Bye-bye.